Hello guys, welcome to Tech Vitals. Today we are going to learn about managing the IP address for networking in Linux. And basically we are going to learn about the nmcli command. So let's get started. So at first, let's see the current IP address that we are using. We can use ifconfig or we can also use ipaddr command to check the IP address of our system. So we have the network interface called ENPS010 and we have the IP address of 192.168.7.177, and it's a dynamic IP address because it is allocated by our router to the system. And today we are going to learn about creating the static and the dynamic IP address using the nmcli command. So let's clear the screen first. If we type nmcli con, that is connection, and show, then it will show us the list of connection that we have in this system. So right now we have 3 connections. So the name of the first connection is wired connection 2 and it is a Ethernet connection, and the device or the network interface is ENP0S10. Second one is VIR-VR0. It's a bridge type connection and the device name is VIR-BR0. And the last one we have is the wired connection 1, which is also a Ethernet connection, but there is no device or there is no network interface for that connection. And if we type nmcli con show and then dash active, then it will show us the active connections that is currently running in the system. So these two with the device ENP0S10 and VIR-VR0 are the active connections, and the network interface that we are currently using for our remote login is this ENP0S10, which is the Ethernet device. And we saw the IP address in this network interface that was 192.168.7.177, which was dynamically allocated by our router. And this command is to show the connections we have. And if you want to see the devices or the network interface in our system, you can type nmcli dev, that is for the device. And if you type status, it will show the status of all the network devices. As you can see, this ENP0S10 device is connected. This VIR-VR0 is also connected. And these two devices are unmanaged, so they are not connected. And if you want to see the detailed information about any of these devices, you can type nmcli dev show and the name of the device, for example ENP0S10, and then it will show you all the details, for example the name of the device, the type of the network, the name of the connection, the IP address, the gateway, and all sort of informations. Now as we know, in this network device ENP0S10 we have a dynamic IP address 192.168.7.177, and now let's create a static IP address or the static connection in this device. So for that we are going to use the nmcli command. So let's first clear the screen, and now let's type nmcli con for connection and then add, and now we have to give the name using the con name space, and we can give it the name of static, and then if name. If name is to determine the device or the network interface where we want to create the connection. So we have the device ENP0S10, and let's make the auto connect no, that is we have to manually connect to this connection. Then type is Ethernet, and then since it's a static connection, we have to give the IP address manually. So IP4, that is IP version 4. Let's give 192.168.7.187/24, which is the subnet mask. And then we have to give the gateway GW4, and the gateway is the IP address of our router, that is 192.168.7.1. and now let's press the enter. Okay, so it said connection static. It's successfully added. And now if we type nmcli console, then you can see the static has been added, but it's not showing the device of ENP0S10. So let's check the details. Console static. So the interface name is ENP0S10. This is okay. Okay, so let's try to connect this connection, and to make this connection on, we have to use the command nmcli con op and the name of connection, that is static. And now as you can see, previously we were connected with this 192.168.7.177 IP address, which was the dynamic IP address. But now since we gave the static IP address and we enabled that static IP address, so that's why we have lost connection with the virtual machine. And if we go to our virtual machine, and see the ifconfig or IP addr, the IP address in ENP0S10 is now 192.168.7.187, which is the static IP address that we just gave. So now the static IP address is on and the previous dynamic IP address is down. So that's why we lost connection with this virtual machine from our mobile extern device. So to connect it back, we have to create new session with the static IP address that we just created, that is 192.168.7.187. The username is root. Now let's try to connect, and if we give the password for the root, let's save the password, and now we are back in the virtual machine, and we can check the IP address, and the IP address is 192.168.7.187. So we just created the static IP address, and to check if the IP address is working properly, we can ping to google.com. If google.com replied, then that means the connection is in the good condition. And as you can see, it said the google.com name or service not known. So here we are not being able to connect to the google.com. So in this case, we have to edit the name server. We can do that by going into etc resolve.conf file, and here we have to add the name server. So let's type name server, and the Google's name server is 8.8.8.8. It's the primary DNS of Google, and let's also give the secondary DNS of Google, that is 8.8.4.4. Now let's save it, and let's try to ping the google.com again. And now as you can see, we are getting the reply from the google.com. Let's stop this. So after creating the static IP address, if you cannot ping to the google.com or any other website, you can just go to this etc/resolve.conf file, and you can add the name server, that is, you can add the DNS the primary DNS and secondary DNS of Google, and then you will be able to ping to Google or any other website or the domain. Now let's try to create a dynamic connection with the dynamic IP address. Let's clear the screen first. And before creating the dynamic connection, let's check what is the active connection right now. So static is the active connection which we created, and the device is ENP0S10. So previously when we checked, we couldn't see the device name, but when we activate the connection, device name is up here. So that means we created the static connection in this device, that is ENP0S10, successfully. And now let's create one more connection, which will be the dynamic connection in the same network device, that is ENP0S10. So we are going to use the same command, nmcli con add, and we have to give it the name con-name. And now let's give it a name of dynamic, and the if name means the device where we want to create this connection, so that will be ENP0S10, and type will be Ethernet. And since it's going to be the dynamic address, we are not going to give it the IP address manually, so we will not allocate any IP address and gateway address, because that way the router will itself allocate the IP address for this connection. So let's just type the enter, and you can see the connection dynamic has been successfully added. If we see the nmcli connection, so then dynamic is here, but it's not active right now. But we can see the details of this connection by using nmcli con so and the name dynamic. We can see the interface or the device where the connection is created is ENP0S10, and let's activate this connection by using nmcli con up and the name of this connection dynamic. And since we just activate the dynamic connection, we lost the connection with the static connection, because right now we are connected with this 192.168.7.187 IP address, which is the static IP address. And since the static IP address is not active anymore, and we just activate this dynamic connection, now we gotta check the dynamic IP address of this connection first, and then only we can create the connection with our virtual machine. So let's go to our virtual box and check the IP address. If we type IP ADDR, the IP address is 192.168.7.177, which is exactly the same IP address we were connected before. So if we go to our MobaXterm application and go to this section, then you can see we are already in the virtual machine. So we are in the root directory. So here in the same network interface or in the same network device, we created two different connections. One is the static, where we allocated the IP address ourselves, and one is the dynamic connection, where the router is allocating the IP address to the virtual machine. So when we will activate the static connection, the dynamic connection will not work and we have to switch to the static connection. And when we activate the dynamic connection, the static connection will be disabled and we have to connect to our virtual machine using the dynamic connection. So you can create as many connections as you want, and when you activate any of the connection, you have to give the IP address of the active connection to your MobaXterm application to remote login or any other application beside MobileStorm, like you can also use the PuTTY application or VNC or any other application that supports the Secure Shell or SSH remote login. You have to use the IP address of the activated connection. And since the dynamic connection is up right now, if we check the nmcli console active, then you can see dynamic connection is active right now and static connection is disabled. And you can also modify these connections. So for example, when we created this static connection, we disabled the auto connect option. That is, when we restart the network server, then this static will not be connect automatically. We have to manually activate this connection. But if you want to activate this connection automatically whenever the network service is restarted, you can modify this connection by using nmcli con mod is to modify, and then you have to give the name of the connection, that is static. And to enable the auto connection, you have to type connection.autoconnect space yes. And if you press the enter, and if you check the details of the static connection, sorry, the spelling mistake, static, and now here you can see connection.autoconnect is yes, that is enabled. To make it disable again, type nmcli con mod, the name of the connection, and then connection.autoconnect no. And if you see the detail, now the auto connect is disabled, and the IP address of this static connection is 192.168.7.187. But if you want to change that IP address, you can also modify the IP address of that static connection. So when we created the static connection, we gave it the IP address of 192.168.7.187. But if you want to change the IP address, then you can use nmcli con mod, the name of the connection, static, and then the IP address, IP before that addresses, and then the new IP address. So this time let's give it the IP address of 192.168.7.197/24. Let's hit the enter, and now we just changed the IP address of that static connection. And if we enable or if we activate this static connection, then we will have to use this new IP address to connect to our virtual machine. So let's activate this static connection, nmcli con up, then static. So since we activated this static connection, this dynamic connection is not working anymore. So we are not connected to our virtual machine anymore. And since we changed the IP address of static connection, this old IP address is also not going to work to connect to our virtual machine. So we have to create a new session, go to SSH, and then give the new IP address, that is 192.168.7.197, and let's give the username root and hit OK. And now if we press the password of the root and save it, now we are connected to our static connection again, and this time the IP address is 192.168.7.197, which we just modified a moment ago. And one more thing, so in this lesson we created two connections, one is static and one is dynamic, and both connections are created in the network device named ENP0S10. So if we check the status of that device using nmcli dev So, and the name of the device ENP0S10. Here you can see the general connection is static because the static connection is activated right now, and if the dynamic connection was up, then here it would display dynamic. So whichever connection is on, that connection will be stored in the general connection of that device. So in this lesson we learned to create static and dynamic connection in our network interface. Hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and that's gonna do it for this video. I'll see you soon with the next video. Till then, keep learning. Goodbye.